Welcome. I'm Gary Parr. You're listening to Fiber Talk. Actually, you're watching Fiber Talk. If you have come to this video by way of the audio podcast that I posted today, you found the right spot. And if you are normally a watcher of Fiber Talk shows through YouTube, that's just useless information. This front piece that I'm putting on with today's show has two purposes. One is to call your attention to our sponsor, Fire Poppies, at firepoppies.com, and a couple of things there. Susan Winter is collecting now sign-up information for the Brenda Gervais Coming to America series, and she hopes to hear early May details on that. But for right now, if you're interested in the Coming to America series from Brenda Gervais, then contact Susan at Fire Poppies and get on the list so that she can send you information when she has the information. And also two other things there at Fire Poppies. Remember that Susan is a supplier dealer of Lowry stands and accessories. So if you're interested in a Lowry stand, rather than ordering from overseas, you can order directly from Fire Poppies and get your stand shipped here in the U.S. if you're in the U.S., if that's convenient for you. And then also our Stitch Along on July 5, Debbie Rowley's Royal Garden. Susan is putting together kits for that, and we'll be having kits available, and or if you just want to buy threads, or if you're missing a thread and already have the rest in your stash or whatever, she'll be able to help you out with that. So if you're going to participate in that Royal Garden Stitch Along with Vonna and me starting on July 5, Susan can help you with that. The other thing I call your attention to, because I just think it's a great time, is Susan has these Rioli's eggs, or Riolis Easter eggs, that on a live show here 3 or 4 weeks ago, Jessica Grimm showed. She had done one of these where you do a needlepoint band in the middle, and then you have beads on top and bottom, and it's a neat little kit. They come from Russia. An organization in Russia designed them. There are 3 different kinds, and it's all based on this wooden egg. It's a solid wood egg, nicely finished, and I thought, this is my kit, because I had to have one of these things. Might be fun to paint this white or a light blue or something, depending on what the colors are in the kit. But everything goes on this wooden egg, so it's not some cheesy plastic egg or some weak form. It's a solid wood frame egg. And then, of course, you get the cloth to stitch on. It looks like it's an even weave, some kind of an even weave, Lugana or something like that. You get threads, and they look to be quality threads, probably DMC. They kind of have that DMC look to them. So you get all the threads, and there's some metallics in there. And, of course, beads. There's a lot of beads, as you can imagine, if you're going to bead that egg, bead the bandwidth into the egg. So there's plenty of beads there. And they look also to be quality beads. According to Jessica Grimm, this is a quality product all the way around. She was very pleased with it and was able to, I think, put it together in not too much more than an afternoon. But just a fun, different kind of thing to do. And Susan has a limited number of those in her shop. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, I just think it's neat. So I took some time here to show it to you, because it's just different. And Jessica's worked up really well. She had a really good look when she showed it on the show. So you might check that out in addition to the other things I mentioned. Then the other reason I'm doing this front piece to our show is to explain to you that coming up here shortly, you will see our Sunday show, and it's not your normal audio podcast. It's a video I did with Natalie Dupuis, and we talk about it, couching and gold work. And that's all based off of a research paper she did with an EGA, Embroiderers Guild of America, an EGA grant. And so she did research. She traveled to England, and she traveled to the San Francisco school, and did a lot of research on this paper to get a little history and some understanding of the uses and techniques of a variety of couching techniques. And Natalie does a lot of gold work. She designs some beautiful gold work pieces, and there are links in the page for this podcast to get to Natalie's things. But she's very, very nice designs, very talented lady, and so she wanted to learn more about couching. So she did this research paper, and then when she announced that she had completed it, my thought was, all right, let's do a Sunday show, but do a video. So what we've done and what will follow here is that video where we talk about the various techniques. She shows examples. We have photos from her research and live examples of the various techniques, and just talk about couching and gold work in general. And had a great time doing it with her. And then on top of that, next Saturday, we're going to do, and that would be Saturday, May 2 at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Natalie will join Vaughn and me for a live show on our YouTube channel that will be designed to answer your questions. So watch this video, and then on May 2nd at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, join us for our live show with Natalie and Vanna, and bring your questions. So if you go through this video, you say, hey, I'd like to know more about this, or I've tried couching and it doesn't work. Natalie, can you help me? This is a show for you. You can get help right from the source. Right from the source, very talented lady, and she can help you answer your questions, help you better understand the history, how these things are used, a lot of it in ecclesiastical environments. So join us on the 2nd. And we're doing this so that you have a week to watch the show, and then you can join us and either learn from others or ask your own questions, but just become better informed. So video show today, and then a week from, or then Saturday, May 2nd at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, then we'll have the live show on the YouTube channel that you can watch and ask your questions. And of course, we'll record that and we'll make that available after the fact. So if you can't be there on Saturday, then you'll be able to watch it later. But the live part obviously allows you to ask questions and ask follow-up questions and watch people ask questions, and then be able to maybe ask something that wasn't clear, whatever it might work for you. But to help you better understand couching and gold work, because as a lot of designs, particularly counted canvas designs, are using more gold work, more couching techniques, and it's a fun thing to know. So if you're remotely interested in it, it's worth your time to watch this and then to join us next Saturday for the live show. And so with that, then I will now switch over and you'll get greeted by me again. And hope you enjoy and learn something from the show with Natalie Dupuis. Welcome. I'm Gary Parr, and that's Natalie Dupuis right there. Hi, Natalie.
Hi.
And Natalie is joining us today. Now, back in September of 2019, we did a podcast, and we got to learn about Natalie and her career and what she does with needlepoint, or needlework in general. And then now, since then, Natalie has done and completed a research paper under the Embroiderers Guild of America or Canada?
America.
A grant. And she did a research paper on couching. And so what we're going to do in this show is we're going to talk about what she learned, because I've read the paper and I learned a lot of things, so we're going to learn them together, what she's learned, and then some demonstrations and some photos so that we can learn. I did not know what you have 8 different types of couching in this research paper. Who knew? I thought there was Ornue and then you just did regular couching, but there's all kinds. So we're going to learn all about that, see some examples. Natalie's going to do a little demonstration here and there for us, and we're just going to learn about it. It's going to be fun. Thank you. So what is it? I mean, the first obvious question, you're going to do a research paper. You want to do some research for EGA. Why couching?
Right. Why couching?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, my passion in needlework is gold work. I am really attracted to the bling of the metallic threads, and gold silver, copper, all different kinds of metals. They're precious. And so they're not typically sewn through the fabric. They're held on top to preserve the quality of the thread and to allow for maximum shine. So they're held onto the fabric with a stitch called couching. So if you like gold work, then you like couching. And as I was getting further into my gold work journey, I started looking in lots of different reference books and would see that there was a confusion of terms. Some authors were using one word and the other would use another for the same thing. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting if there was one place to go to have an explanation of the different types of couching stitches based on photos and also historical texts. So I looked into the EGA's research grant program. They have a research fellowship grant, and I applied for that, which would give the researcher some funds to use however they see fit to conduct their research. So I used it to go to the UK and to go to the San Francisco School of Needlework and Design to access their archives and also the library. And in the end, it resulted in a 30-page paper discussing the different subcategories of couching. At first, I was going to focus on just ornue and Italian shading. But then I thought, actually, I should step back and maybe have a broader view of all the different types of couching stitches. And I came up with 8 subcategories, but there's more little fine ones as well. But I couldn't do everything.
Yeah, I'm sure there are. So you go to England. Where did you do your research in England?
Right. So there was 3 main places that I wanted to go. Actually, 4. The first place I went is into the archives of the Victoria and Albert Museum, which is held at the Clothworkers Center. You can go there by appointment. You just pull up the museum number of the item that you wish to study, and then you're given a table and a time slot, and they have the items laid out for you, and you can examine them, with a microscope. You can take photos and spend as much time with this item in a quiet space, which is lovely.
Yeah.
And then there's also the public galleries at the Victoria and Albert Museum that anyone can go and see. And then I wanted to see some of the pieces that were in the archives at the Royal School of Needlework. So again, you make an appointment and you can have a room to study some of these pieces. And additionally, I wanted to have somebody to talk to, a live person. I thought, right, okay, who's an expert here that I can talk to about this? And Beryl Dean came to mind, but she died long ago. But one of her students was Elizabeth Elvin, who is the former principal of the Royal School of Needlework. And she's still around and doing well. So I approached her to see if she'd have me for an interview. I had no idea where she lived. And it turned out she was kind of just down the street from where I was.
Oh.
So she had me over for afternoon tea at her place and a long discussion about gold work and couching and Beryl Dean. And I got to see some very good examples that she had on hand and to talk about where these terms came from and how they were used. So that was quite valuable for me. It was a little bit intimidating, actually. Oh, dear. It was like principal for forever, and who am I to come and interview her? But she was really friendly. She picked me up in her convertible with her ponytail, and I was just so impressed by her.
Yeah, I can imagine what that's like, though. Intimidating is the best word for that. Somebody who's forgotten more than you'll ever learn, and you get to talk to them. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I felt that was really precious to have a whole afternoon of a recorded interview with her.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And then in the U.S., I went to the San Francisco School of Needlework and Design they had some samples, some textiles for me to look at, but most valuable was the books in their library. They have an extensive library, including an antique section. And I was able to have many of these out right in front of me to study and go reference back and forth and make copies to take back home with me, because obviously I can't borrow these books.
Right.
So that was a really precious time to go and study there and think about how am I going to structure this paper, and what's the range of dates that I can include in this paper. just to kind of have a little bit of clout to what I'm saying.
Right,
So,
right. Well, and that had to be any research paper like that. That has to be challenge number one is to your time frame. If you're going to do a historical thing, what am I going to cover? Because we have a few thousand years to work with here, so
yeah,
that had to have been quite a challenge just to say, all right, I got to limit myself to this much.
yeah, and also to parts of the world. I mean, I'm not talking about couching in China and couching in India, and I mean, it can just go on and on and on. So it's focused on European couching from medieval times to present day.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't even think about that because those other parts of the world, that's a whole nother set of needlework. Yes, yeah. So all right, so let's just start out. Explain what couching is and its general function, and then let's work our way through these 8 different types.
Okay, so couching is taking a thread. It can be any thread. It can be a cotton thread if you want. It can be a cord. Typically, though, it's a metallic thread, a metal thread, held on to the surface of the fabric. So I've made this picture for my students. So imagine that this purple line here is your fabric. This is a cross section. This is your gold thread here. You have your needle that comes down and up. Okay? So you're holding this gold thread onto the fabric with a stitch that goes around it. And your needle's coming down at an angle and coming out at an angle as well. So, for example, I have this stand here.
And the angle is important because we want the insertion and exit points to be hidden by the gold thread then. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And you want a little bit of an angle because you're doing multiple rows of this one after the other, and that helps to bring them nice and snug together.
Okay.
So, as an example, I've got a gold thread here, and I don't want to sew this through my fabric. It's going to destroy the fabric, destroy the thread. So I come out on one side of the thread, I bring it over and come down on the other side of the thread. That's it. That's the simple couching stitch.
Okay, and then tension, I'm sure, comes in as it always does. So your tension is keeping the gold thread so it doesn't get humpy, if I can use that technical term, and then also your couching stitch then not pull down too tight. Do I understand that correctly?
There's a tension. There's always a tension issue as well. So you don't want it too tight. You don't want it too loose. Otherwise, things move around or don't look good. I mean, at the same time, there's some modern stitching that would pull very hard, and they would want that kind of lumpy look. But typically, your gold thread is just held on nice and smoothly on top of your fabric with another thread. So the metallic thread, you call this your couching thread. And then the cotton or silk thread that you use to hold it in place, most people refer to this as the holding thread.
Okay.
So,
all right. So now that switches me around because I thought the functional thread, the holding thread, would be called the couching thread, but it's not. It's okay.
I mean, you can call it that as long as it makes sense to you. But for me, when I was writing, I was thinking the couching thread is your metallic thread. That can, as I said, it can be a cord, it can be a twist, it can be anything. And then what you hold it onto is your holding thread. You're holding it in place with another thread. And that can be also anything. It's typically cotton or silk. Mm-hmm. Depends on the effect you want.
Yeah. Now, I got to believe ground cloth tension is critical.
Yes.
Has
absolutely.
to be as tight as you can make it.
Yeah. So when you're framing up for gold work in general, it's heavy materials. There's going to be a lot of stitching happening on the fabric. So you usually have, muslin or calico base. And then on top of that, you have your silk or your cotton or your linen attached to that and really stretched tight. I like to use a slate frame or ever-tight stretcher bars because I find the other kind slackens off really easily and then you can get uneven tension. And sometimes if it slackens off a lot, all of a sudden your beautiful couching that was nice and smooth, it kind of ripples and you're like, oh, it's like 100 hours of work there.
Yeah, that would be demoralizing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, so I can see that, how critical that can be. Uh, Tension on the ground cloth. I mean, that all ways, all four directions, but then be very careful as you're putting down your thread and couching it so that, like you said, it's just held there, but it's also held there such that it isn't shifting around.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
And depending on the effect you want, you can have very thick threads, you can have thin threads, and the closer together your couching stitches are will help dictate how steady your couching thread will stay in place. So, for example, you wouldn't have a couching thread more than, your holding thread stitch more than 5 millimeters. I don't know what that is in imperial.
It's okay.
Like that.
That's all right.
I tend to go for every 3 or 4 millimeters for a stitch,
Okay.
and around a corner you would have them even closer. For example, here, this little sample, I make up little samples to show my students sometimes. Here around this curve here, this is just a line of silver thread that I've held in place with couching. And my stitches are very close together here. For effect, I wanted it to be a very dark color, and a curve. And here they're much more spaced out. You can see more of the silver thread. And anyway, the curve is not so strong.
But then that also suggests to me then that we can use the holding thread, much like in black work, where we can create dimension and density with the holding thread by making it close or spacing it out, and then also the reflectivity of the silver or gold can come through or be hidden. So I could just see on that simple little thing how you get a really nice visual effect as you work around that curve.
And this is the magic of gold work and couching.
Okay.
It is, playing with that reflective quality based on what thread you use as your holding thread and how dense they are. And of course, there's like the whole other side of how much padding is underneath as well.
Yes.
So we're not going into padding, but like, for example, here's another little sample that I made up for my students. So you can see and this is to talk about reflective quality. This one, I have heavy couching in here.
Whoops, hang on just a sec. There it is. Okay, there you are. Go ahead.
This one here, I have just regular couching, and you can see this is much more, reflective than that one. And then this one I've couched, instead of straight lines, I've couched in different shapes. There's a triangle, there's a circle in there.
Mm-hmm. Angle that a little bit down so the reflection isn't. There we go. There. Oh, I see. All right.
So yeah, you can absolutely play with that. And I mean, you wouldn't ever want to cover your metal threads so much that you can't even see your metal threads. There are some ornament pieces that are done like that, but I feel like that kind of defeats the purpose of using the metallic threads.
Yeah.
Might as well just put, cotton twist or something underneath. You want some of it to shine through.
Yeah. Now,
so
and then also part of the art is what you do with that holding thread, whether it's a color or you try to make it invisible. Those are decisions that we make there.
Yeah. So here for another example, this is a design by Mandy Ewing, and this is meant to be a little mushroom. And the couching thread, the holding thread that I've used up here on the gold part, it's almost the same color as this. So it's not detracting from the shine of the gold. And then in here, I have different densities of reds and beiges and browns. But I've left some little spaces so that some of the gold can glint through as well.
Okay. Yeah. Angle that down just a little bit there. There we go. Now we can see. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So there you're using the holding thread to add color and the pattern, but you're still letting just enough of that gold show through to give it some reflectivity in there.
Yeah. And then here on the gold part, like, right here where there's not the mushroom design, I'm using what we call a self-colored thread. So it's like a translucent gold, so you can hardly even see it. And that's actually really hard on the eyes to stitch. The gold thread is shiny, and then you've got this self-colored thread. You're like, I think I put that in the right spot. I can't see it, but...
So then, obviously, in doing this stitching, very heavy lighting and magnification, or are you able to do it without the magnification?
I use my magnifiers.
Okay.
So I always use a light, unless every once in a while the light sometimes makes it hard to see. So I'll turn off the light, but usually I need good lights. And then I've got some magnifiers here and
Okay.
switch away. I got into a bit of a problem with magnifiers. I was using one that actually made the image look bigger, but not sharper. And what I actually needed was sharper.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to pay attention to what kind of magnification you're looking for.
Yeah.
So
Well, and that's why I asked that question, because I got to believe the lighting is such a reflective material that can be a plus or a minus just depending on the angle and intensity.
I think for me, it only matters when I'm using self-colored thread. Then sometimes I need to turn off the light. But otherwise, when I'm using colored cottons and silks as my holding thread, then it's very helpful.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm just always interested in the techniques. So let's go to each of the techniques then. So the first one in your paper is underside couching, right, which suggests to me that I'm trying to pierce the couching thread underneath it and go back down through the ground cloth, but not the case at all.
No. So imagine that you have a metal thread on top. No, like taking a big piece of this. Let's see, how can I get the end of this here?
Wait, hold that up. That's what a hank of metal thread looks like. Wow.
Yeah, it's quite a large one. I pulled this one out of my stash because I wanted you to be able to see a large thread. So, okay, so you've got this, large piece here. And this is resting on top of your fabric. Imagine you do a couching stitch over top of this, and it just comes down. Your couching stitch pulls it so hard that it goes into the back of your fabric. So I've got a tiny example here. Let's see if we can make this work. If it's not working, Gary, just tell me and I'll try something else. So get my magnifier on here. So I've got, this is a Japanese gold thread laid on the surface of my fabric. Just get my thread ready here. So with this technique, you want to come up and down in the exact same hole. And the reason that this was done was so that you're creating a series of hinges. So I've come up on one side. I'm going to bring my holding thread over top, and I might have to shift around this gold thread to look for that same hole. Okay, so now my needle is in the same hole as where this thread came out of.
Mm-hmm.
And now, if I leave it just like this, we will call that a couching stitch.
Yes.
Now, if I just give it a little tug until you hear a pop.
Huh.
There we go. And I've just pulled it to the back of the fabric there.
And the pop is that audible. Wow.
Yeah. Actually, my thread broke there, so I'm going to show that. You don't normally need to pull that hard. Let me try that again. So you don't want to pull a lot of it to the back either. You want it to be just a little bit so that you have a tiny little hinge on the back. And so you can imagine why this would not work if you don't get it into the same hole.
Yes.
It just won't come into the back, right? So you go along. Now I've got my couching stitch, and I'm just going to ease this through to the back. Here we go.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I move along. Go back into the same hole that I just came out of. And I'm going to give it a little, where is it? Here we go.
This is tedious work, isn't it?
Yeah, there we go. It's in the back again. And then you just carry along. So it's a couching stitch that you pull quite hard on so that you can get a little loop into the back. You can see this. So let me see if I can take this out here so you can see that little loop, okay? So there's a tiny bit of gold.
Oh, I see it.
Right there
Yep.
in there. those are the two loops that I pulled to the back. So when you're doing that, then it's called underside couching. So you can imagine that if this was used for church vestments in medieval times. You can imagine if the whole garment is covered in that it's like thousands of hinges that are all over the fabric, and it's quite flexible for the wearer.
Mm-hmm. So I can see a lot of functional value to that, but just watching you do those 3 stitches, that's a lot of work.
You get faster. I just want to show you a bad example, okay, of the back.
Okay.
So this was my first go at it, and you can see how large my loops are on the back. That's the back side there.
Oh.
So those are way, way, way too big. It should just be just a tiny bit of the gold through the back, and then carry on.
Uh-huh.
Carry on stitching, pulling a little bit through. On the front, it gets this kind of, it looks a bit wavy like this.
Okay.
That's the effect. And then on the back, you have tiny little loops.
But in a church sanctuary with candles and everything everywhere, you would have a lot of reflective things happening.
Yeah. And there's also, it was a very hard wearing stitch. Like, it lasted a long time on fabrics, because normally if your holding thread is on top, eventually it's going to get worn. It's going to be exposed to light. So it would wear out faster. Whereas the existing pieces that have some underside couching on it, they still exist. They're doing well. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because it's a strong stitch, and you really get a lot of reflective quality, because your cotton thread isn't obscuring any of the gold. It's hidden underneath the fabric.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so that's where okay, that makes sense to me now. But now this is not used much anymore then, this technique?
Almost never.
Okay.
I mean, there's been a bit of a resurgence of interest since the Opus Anglicanum exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum 2 years ago. People became interested in it, and if you're keen, I know Alison Cole has a kit with some underside couching in it, so you can get an explanation there. And there's also an excellent video, a YouTube video that you can watch. Sarah Humphrey, if you just type in Sarah Humphrey underside couching, she shows you with a good camera on the top and the bottom how to do underside couching. But those are a few places you can go if you're keen.
Okay, and I can see in there it became really obvious the ground cloth tension, how critical that is, because you're pulling hard on that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you need it to spring back and stay tight. Yeah.
But as I said, it's just not used. It's kind of a stitch to know for fun, but it's not used for practical reasons anymore. It's just normal couching is all the rage.
Okay. So all right. So that's your ancient one. Then diaper patterns. It's the strangest name on the planet to me. I always struggle with that. So tell me about the diaper patterns, because the more I've looked into those, the more I've come to learn how versatile and widely used diaper patterns are in needlework in general. But so talk about that in terms of couching.
Okay, so a diaper pattern in the UK, they usually say diaper.
Wait, do that again.
Not like baby diapers. Diaper.
Oh, okay. That changes it for me. Okay.
No. So a diaper pattern is using your couching stitches to create vertical lines and here, let me get a picture. Vertical, horizontal, diagonal lines that are going on an angle in both directions. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you have lines going across your design that are only stacked like this, one direction, you wouldn't call this a diaper pattern. But if you've got them crisscrossing, then you can call this a diaper pattern. Last year, you interviewed a lady who wrote a whole book on diaper patterns. This is her book here. Do you remember her?
Oh, do I? Yes.
Yeah, so she goes to length to talk about diaper patterns and how you have to have a visual lines going in the two directions. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you can find these in gold work. You can find them in Japanese Kogen patterns. You can find them in all kinds of cultures. They've used this pattern, geometric patterns. And so for me, for gold work, I was interested in how can I take these patterns and couch so that you have a pleasing effect. And you can find them in historical textiles all over the place. For example, this book here, this is one of my favorites. Can you see in the background here, they've done this couching stitch, and you can see the diagonals.
Mm-hmm.
The gold has been couched with a red thread on a diagonal. This gown is all done in Ornue. We can get to that later. So here's a nice example of it used in gold work.
So when I talked to Ann Strike-Kurtz, that was one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to her, because such extensive use of diaper patterns. Is that right? Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Good. But yep. And I did not realize what you can get out of those simple lines.
Yeah.
Because
you just take a simple this and then you build on it.
Yeah. Yep. And then now, so to take it to a gold work couching level, now we have the lines, we have the contrasting threads, and we have the reflectivity. Now I start to see a real power in terms of what you can do visually. Yeah.
I mean, sometimes, for example, this one here, this is high contrast, okay? Mm-hmm. This is a Japanese Kogin design that's it's their butterfly pattern. If I turn it sideways, you might be able to see the butterfly.
Oh, okay, there it is, yep.
But you can see, the diagonals in two directions. I've taken a silver thread and couched it over with a very contrasting. But sometimes you could use a gold thread and a self-colored thread and still make that pattern, and it's really, to the viewer, they know there's something interesting happening in terms of reflective quality. They can't quite see it, and then you get the right light, and all of a sudden, boom, this pattern comes out, and you're like, wow, I see that. It's like magic. But you can hardly see it because they've used the self-colored thread. So, I mean, that's a whole nother, that's like the highest level of couching of the diaper.
That's where the real pros come in, huh?
Yeah, and these were done long, long ago. Let's see, I had another example I wanted to show you. But it's, okay, yeah, right here. So this is a peer of mine has stitched this one up as well. So this is similar to the one I showed you on the book cover. It's a gold with a brown.
Uh-huh.
So it creates quite a nice effect. And if you pull up, I think, Gary, are you able to pull up the picture from my research paper on diaper patterns? There's one from the public gallery of the V&A.
Yes, which is that?
A Pope from the Henry VIII's household.
Let's see. Yeah, I'm showing the page. There's 5 of them on the page.
Yeah.
So which one is it?
Right, let me get out my copy here. So page 7, this one here.
Yep, that's where I'm at. Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can, if you want to show that one, and then page 9.
Okay. Oh yes. Uh-huh. Now that the cope for Henry VII there.
Yeah.
Look at the dimension they get in that. Wow.
Are you able to switch screens to show it?
Yes, I'm there now. Yes, I'm showing the cope. Yes.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, the top one there, you can see the use of the diaper pattern there around the saint. And then the image just below that, that's a Torah mantle. Mm-hmm. And there's all kinds of different patterns in there if you look closely over the gold.
I see it, yes.
So, widely used in religious textiles.
We're talking countless hours to put this stuff together.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, some pieces that are spectacular might take someone their lifetime to stitch.
Yeah. Wow. And I'm sure this is almost solid gold thread for the most part.
Well, I mean, it would have a fiber core,
mm-hmm.
But the percentage of gold in the threads that were used back then was higher than what we use now. Now we use, the best quality we get is 2%.
Oh, okay.
And typically we're stitching with 0.5 So, would be gilt.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's all patients that people like to use as well. People nowadays, they like to use imitation gold because it stays gold. It stays shiny.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's just a little bit about the diaper there. And people get confused. People will often call anything that they couch with a pattern a diaper pattern, but a diaper needs to have the Van Dyke, the diamond, the crisscross in the two directions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. And then now next in your paper is pattern couching.
Right. So pattern couching would be kind of couching with a pattern that does not have the crisscrossing lines.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, let me see. Well, you could open the pictures on page 11 of my research paper there.
You can just go right there. Yep, I have it. Mm-hmm.
Right. So you can see you can couch kind of with a swirl coming out like that. You can couch in a diagonal row, or you can couch in little blocks like you see on that kind of zoom of the hot air balloon there with the purple and silver. So this I would call pattern couching.
Mm-hmm.
To differentiate it from couching with the Van Dyke, the two diagonal lines. So there's lots of patterns that you can get up to with that. And there's even subcategories within that as well.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I just wanted to mainly show the difference between the diaper and the non-diaper.
Now, in the bottom left picture, the circular item in the bottom left. Now, right. We're changing holding threads as you go around. So in the center, you used almost an invisible thread.
Yep.
And
so
then
that's what I would call a self-colored thread. And then as I've got further out, I switched to a blue there.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see the self-colored thread is pretty hard to see on the eyes. I mean, that's tiny. That shape there in real life is about the size of a nickel.
Oh, my.
So the whole thing is about the size of a nickel.
Wow.
Smaller than a quarter, yeah.
So, okay, so then this pattern couching then allows you, then I see it now, as you go around and get out from the center, then you start to introduce that blue in a spiral look, and then you go to almost solid.
Yeah.
And then the one to the right of that almost looks like a beetle. There's a lot going on in that thing. What is that, balloon, hot air balloon?
Yeah, you can't, from a distance, just a second. Are you on me or are you on the...
Oh, I'm about to be on you.
Okay. So that's this one here, this hot air balloon. And then in here, I've put blocks, like a checkerboard of purple, just to create a pattern. But this... Maybe sideways you can see it better.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So this I put in my pattern couching category.
Yes. Okay, and then tangent on that, what are you doing in the middle there? It looks like ribbon, metal ribbon.
Yeah, exactly. It's called plate. And it comes in different widths. And it's just kind of like a metal ribbon that I've folded back and forth and couched kind of on the inside so you can't see it. To create that volume. And there's some padding underneath as well. So, you can mix in your couching with other aspects of gold work as well. It's often combined with other pieces.
Boy, I can see how this gets addicting in a hurry.
Yeah, it does. And yeah, I mean, it's really fun. This design, Gary, that we talked about the other day, this one there's pattern couching here, and there's just random couching in here. So you can do quite a lot with couching. With this one, depending on how closely I put my couching stitches together, would tell me how much gold is going to shine through when the light is on this. So, here, there's none. There's very little right here. You can see this is much more reflective than these parts here.
Right. No, and I see how you use that to add, subtract color, and put life to that thing. I've been curious now because I'm buying that kit from you, so I'm going to do it. The ends you've left loose.
I did, because I went to study this painting in New York City. The original. This is based on Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night. In case you didn't catch that yet.
Yes.
I
don't have a lot of culture, but I have that much culture. So
I didn't mean you. I meant the viewers. Um, but when I went to see it, I was amazed that you could see it was like unfinished along the sides. You could see his canvas through, and it just looked like it was unfinished. So I decided that I would leave these unfinished as well, a little bit kind of messy looking, because that's how the painting looked to me.
Huh.
So, I mean, you could sink these into the back, which is what's traditionally done, but I felt like Van Gogh was not traditional and his piece looked unfinished, so therefore I would try to attempt that feeling as well with this.
That's incredibly effective. And what is the ground cloth on that?
This is actually a kilt.
See, I'm gonna keep doing that. So you put it down, pick it up, put it down, pick it up. If we do that 15 times, then that's a set, and you're good.
It's a twill fabric that's used for kilt making, actually, but it was the right color. I wanted a really deep navy blue.
Oh, okay.
To, represent a night sky.
Yeah. Beautiful piece. Really stunning. Anxious to do it. Yes. All right, so then now Ornue. And
right.
Ornue is one of those, I think everyone's heard the term, but I'm not sure everyone has a full appreciation of what this is.
Okay. So let's talk back to the olden days here.
Yeah.
So we're talking, medieval times. There were these fantastically shaded pieces that enamelists were doing, painters were doing, and embroiderers were a bit inspired by these images and wanted to think of a way to make these very shadowy, detailed images come to life in their embroideries. And then Ornue was born. And what Ornue is metallic threads laid on the fabric and couched over with many, many different colors and shades to make folds of clothing look real. Shadows around hair and beards look real. So you can imagine there would have to be many, many colors that were used. The rows would have to be very close together and very, very straight.
Mm-hmm.
It was always, always straight. There are examples from this particular period, 1400s that exist still. So the best ones coming from the Netherlands, Northern France, Belgium in particular. And then the English picked it up as well. Anything else, became trendy.
Right.
English picked it up, the Italians picked it up, French. So you can still see fantastic examples of this in museums.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost always on religious vestments, banners, but sometimes you would find it in household embroidered pictures as well. So what's exacting about this technique is that it needed to be straight. And it needed to, the pictures needed to be figurative. So they're often showing a biblical scene.
Okay. So anytime we see Ornue, or what people would call Ornue, where it's not straight, then they have strayed from the traditional origins then.
That's right.
Okay.
And also it must be a figurative. It couldn't be a pattern. So some people are doing something that's just a pattern, and they're calling this Ornue because they've done straight lines with a pattern on it. But that's not Ornue. Ornue needs to be a figurative motif.
Oh, okay.
So, saints.
Yeah.
Saints were often done. I have one here that I made up for my students that I'm just starting. Well, just starting in 2008, but anyway. So this is Saint Clare. She's the patron saint of embroidery. And you can see her clothing here has a lot of shadows and shading, dark brown. So what I wanted to show my students was how you could put a drawing of your given motif on fabric. You shade it in with pencil crayons or whatnot, and this was also done back in the day as well. And then you place your gold threads across and you cover it with your given shades. So right now I have only 3 colors on the go, but I mean, if I wanted to get much more in depth and in detail, I'd have way more than 3 on the go.
Mm-hmm. So, all right. So then I'm laying my gold thread absolutely straight across that robe or skirt.
Yeah.
And then it's my holding threads that are creating the creases and the shadows as it hangs there off of the body.
That's right.
Okay. And so there's the art and the technique is making that happen.
Yes. Imagine you're a painter and you're using your threads to create all the shadows that make the folds of the dress so lovely.
Yeah.
Gary, if you turn to page 13 of my research paper, tell me when you're there.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Oops, 13. I'm one too far. There we have it. The little ornaments, yes.
Yeah, so this is meant to be like 3 Christmas balls, and you can see how many I have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 threads on the go, plus my silver, and that's to create shading. So this is like a modern version of an ornuet piece. Straight lines, lots of colors on the go, building up from kind of just silver to adding color. This would be a good example of a modern ornuet piece.
Okay, let's explore that a little bit. So talk to me about putting down the silver threads there. It looks like you wound them on the end. Talk to me about putting that on the ground cloth.
Right. Okay. So my silver threads are wound onto something called coma. See?
Oh, that's what that spool is. All right, coming back to you now. All right, hang on. We're going to switch cameras back and forth. So now we're on you.
Okay, so these are coma. So you can see I've got a silver thread here and another one here.
Okay.
And I use these kind of like as an extra hand. Okay, so these they're heavy, so they're helping to hold my thread flat as I unwind it, and it's across my fabric, and they're squared on the edge so they don't roll off. So I've got this line, this pair of threads going across the fabric, held in place with a lot of couching stitches as I go across. So, these are kind of invaluable for me when I do ornuet. I can't work without this, particularly because I don't know if you can see back in the picture on page 13.
I'm going back to the picture now. Okay, all right, so let me understand this then. So I thought that spool was just there because that's what you were unwinding from, but it's actually a function to help you maintain tension on the silver thread.
That's right. And it's also making sure that this is from the bottom of that picture to where the stitching is now, it's a continuous length of silver thread. So imagine if I had a long length like that I'm trying to work with and not get it tangled. So coma prevents me from getting I think it's something like 12 meters that I use it in the end, from getting that all tangled up. So sometimes in ornuet pieces, the threads would be cut to the right length. So if you come back to the other screen here,
yep. Mm-hmm.
Can you see here? Sometimes you can cut the threads, so you just have little short bits of gold, and then you have to sink all these at the end later, and that's a royal pain. So what you can get good at is turning your corners so that you have the nice tight corners of a continuous length, like what I've done in that Christmas ornament piece there.
Okay, and by turning the corners, are we holding it down? It's couched down at the corners then to hold it in place.
Yep, exactly. It's quite a procedure to get it nice and flat and turn sharp, but with the right directions, anybody can do it too.
Well, that was the ornaments are another thing, but that was where my eye went the first time, which I know that's not supposed to be what I'm supposed to do in a piece of art. But was because I immediately thought, technically, how are you making those corners so consistent and so tight? So there's a technique there and a skill there just to make that happen, because you have to come right around and line right up next to the previous couching thread.
Yep.
Right side by it. So
absolutely. I mean, I took an online Russian embroidery course, Russian pattern couching course a couple of years ago. So this. What you can see in the picture there is the result of turning corners the Russian way.
I see. Okay.
Which I think is the best way. I've done lots of ways, and this is the way I think looks the neatest and the nicest.
Yes. Okay, and so then the ornaments, it looks like they're padded?
They're not. It's just my great shading, I like to call it.
Okay.
There's no padding in there. It's just, you get depth from your shading.
Mm-hmm.
So, different values of red in there.
So then, all right. So then I applaud that because it does look padded. So bravo.
Well, thank you. And you might also notice that I've drawn vertical lines on the fabric, and that's to help me know where to place my self-colored holding thread on the silver.
Oh.
So on the ornament, I'm placing my thread where the shading dictates, but on the silver where there's nothing, I need to try and make sure I have even spacing on that as well. And after I'm done each row, I take a ruler and I kind of run the ruler along my row. I, pull on the threads that are attached to the coma, and I make sure it's straight before I go to my next row, because every time you get off, it can throw your whole picture off. So the challenge is to keep straight.
I see. So, okay, I see that. Yeah, because it would just compound each row. It would just get worse if you're not straight. Wow.
And some books say to start your ornue piece from the bottom. Some say to start from the top. In my interview with Elizabeth Elvin, she said, start from the middle. That's what Beryl Dean would teach her students, is start from the middle and do one half and then come back to the middle and do the other half. She said, because the viewer's eyes are going to be drawn to the middle, and you really want to make sure that is straight.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense.
That was a good tip.
Yeah. So, okay, wow. So ornue these days, I mean, that's what we see that term all the time, but this, what you're doing here, this is traditional, the true way to do it, and other people are just kind of using the term as a descriptive thing then.
Yeah, and they just might not know that there can be distinctions. Mm-hmm. And if you care to know, there are distinctions. And one thing I wanted to mention, particularly because I think a lot of your viewers like to do canvas work, is you can do ornue on canvas and Congress cloth. And the benefit of that, particularly for someone who maybe wants to have a try at this and needs a little bit of guidance, is that there are clear lines already and there are predetermined holes. Mm-hmm. So you can't get the detailed shading that you would, as I've shown you in some of the pieces already, but you can get a good idea of practicing straight lines and also having those holes to help you know where to put your thread. And I had a couple of good examples that I wanted to show you from Needle Pointers magazine. Here. So, for example, this piece here, this is done. So this is by Carleen Harwick from Needle Pointers magazine. And you can see she's used a silver twist, and you get the idea of the ornue happening in there. There's not so much shading happening. It's more blocky-ish, but this would be a good introduction to ornue.
And in that case, using the Congress cloth almost as a crutch to help you get a sense of how to keep things lined up.
Yeah, exactly. And, Jane Zimmerman, a lot of people would know her. She's calling this ornue couching. And so, here's her, she did a butterfly, again, very blocky in colors. Mm-hmm. And here as well. So one way to give this a try might be to use a fabric that helps you, right. To get started. And then if you like it, you could go and try drawing or painting on your own fabric and do a design and see how you can go with your own shading. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I can see how that would really help if it's your first go at it, to have that grid pattern to hold you and keep you in check. And then when you're making all those markings, are we just doing that with an ultra hard pencil, or what? Nothing fancy there.
Yeah, no, so I didn't use a pencil. There's two tools that I use quite a lot. One I use our archival ink pens. Let's see if I've got one handy right here. Yes, I do. So I like, these Pigma micron pens, very, very fine 005. So they're, it's like the tiniest little tip there. You can't even see it actually.
Yeah. Okay.
There's kind of like fabric pencils that are blue. I like to use those with a very hard tip. So I use those. I try not to use pencil because pencil sometimes smudges, and then your threads can pick up those colors.
Yeah, that's why I asked, because that's one thing that always makes me nervous about pencil is just that smudging and little pieces of graphite coming off, and so
No,
those
the Pigma pens are great. The Pigma archival ink size 005, fantastic.
stays right where you want it. Okay, all right. We now see I get all these questions, and we need to move along. So
Okay.
Italian shading was the next one that you did.
Right. Okay.
Because I'll ask questions all day long, so we need to move along.
Yeah. Gary, did you want to show that picture on page 14 there and 16 quickly, just to show different variations?
Oh, yes.
And then we can move on to Italian shading.
Right. Hang on.
So that one on page 14 there, that's a gift to Elizabeth Elvin from Beraldine. And you can look at the shading, on the bosom of the woman there. And this is an interesting piece because, in her background, you can see that she's used pattern couching. But on the bodice of the woman's dress, this is a nice example of ornue, and the shading in the cheek of the woman as well. So that's a piece from the 1980s. And then if you flip over to page 16, you can see these are some pictures from the archives of the RSN, which, there's their traditional angel on the top. The body is done in ornue. And then there's a very modern interpretation a bit further below by Charlotte Bailey from 2012. So that's almost like comic book style there.
Yes. But still with the same technique.
Yep. And, for the angel on top, you can see that they've used doubled rows of gold. And then the Charlotte Bailey piece, the Sailor Girl, or Miss Briefing Time, sorry, is a single row of silver. And, she has to account for the width of her cotton thread that she's using on top. And that's why you can see the little bit of spacing in between the rows as well.
Most interesting.
Right. So, a quick overview there.
Yeah, well, no, it's very, very helpful. Thank you. So then we move on. Next in your paper was Italian shading.
Right. So Italian shading is kind of a term that Beraldine coined, and it came about as a way to differentiate ornue straight and ornue in principle, but not straight. So.
Okay.
Going in waves and going in circles. So creating a design where the threads are not laid straight across the fabric. It still can be figurative. So if you pull up the images from page 21 of the research paper, there's some great examples there.
Yes.
So there's that poppy in the top corner. That's designed by Anna Scott from Australia. So you can see it has shading. There's I think there was 3 kinds of reds in there. And then some little bit of brown in the middle, but it's going in a circle. So now I wouldn't necessarily put this in the category of Italian shading anymore. I may still have ornue anymore because it's not straight.
Yes.
And there's the color wheel brooch there. You can see the colors blending into the other, but and then the flower underneath, the 2 different flowers. So you can see the bottom, the one with the purple fabric.
Yes.
It's stitched by Mary Martin, and you look at the petals of her flower there. An excellent example of Italian shading there, because she's shading and she's following the contours of her design.
Fascinating.
Alison Cole also does this a lot. She has many fantastic examples of following the contours of her design with using couching for shading. So this one gets confused a lot with ornue, because it's kind of a fine line, with the main difference being straight or following the contour.
Yeah. Well, see, and this is one of the big things that I learned is up till I read your paper, I had thought that anything where we had thread like that and we could create patterns was ornue, but there's a very distinct difference in terms of the straight line, and then if you go to the shading, then you you have more flexibility, I guess.
And a motif, right? It's not geometric. Nothing geometric you will call ornuade.
Okay. Uh-huh.
So it needs to be a figurative motif. So if you look at page 22, the image on page 22, these are also taken from the archives of the RSN. They have a large piece called the Good Shepherd, and you can see they have all around the grapes, and then the halo, and in the leaf there's different shades of greens, purples. I can't remember if the robe of looks like Jesus in the picture there. I can't remember if his robe is done in ornué or not, but clothing was often done in ornué, straight lines.
Mm-hmm.
So, now you have a better example, a better idea of the difference between ornué and Italian shading and pattern couching and diaper patterns.
Yes. Wow. But this is where your paper is so valuable because it helps us make those separations,
right,
and understand the differences and how they can be applied and where the art comes in each case. Yes.
Yeah.
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 All right. Now, I don't even know how to say this one. Damascening?
Think of damask fabric.
Yeah. I figured that's where it came from. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So this is nice, simple. Think of it as wavy couching, kind of these loops that come around like this, undulating loops, one into the other. Simple, can be done with single thread, double thread. Sarah Rakestraw allowed me to use a picture from her new book.
Yeah, here, let me show that.
Glorious Gold Work. So that's a very nice example of it there. It's kind of a filigree effect to, imagine these wrought iron fences and undulating. So that's that one, nice, simple.
Yes.
You can get your head around that easily.
That I can handle, yes.
And then the next one here, I'll show you an example. In Alison Cole's book, The Goldwork Masterclass, she has a whole chapter on couching as well, and then she has a very nice picture here of the next.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
So that would be there. Also in
that book, highly recommend that book. I own that one, and that is a treat just to read.
Yeah, very nice. This one here by Jane Lemon. This is an excellent one on metal thread because it's like a dictionary of techniques and tools. And here you can see it on this stomacher.
Oh, I see.
All in there. So it's like a filling.
Yes, that's what I was just going to say. It makes a nice filling stitch without having to be solid.
Exactly. You see this on cakes sometimes. Sometimes fancy cakes have that all around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we call that, say it for me, Damas.
Oh, well, the first one with the blue background, I would say this damascening.
Damascening, okay. And then this is vermicelli.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm really starting now to get a picture of how I can use several of these techniques. If I wanted to really go all out, you can really take these techniques and combine them and create all kinds of effects in a greater piece.
Yep, definitely. It's and because the stitch itself, I was saying earlier, it's fairly easy. You come up, you go over your metal thread, and you come back down again.
Mm-hmm.
Space them as far or close apart as you want to, but you can see the amazing range. There was a piece I studied from the 1600s at the Clockworkers Center, and I don't have permissions yet to share that online, but it was an embroidered picture, and they used different shades of brown with this vermicelli all over to create a muddy ground, and it was perfect. It was like the perfect stitch for that, and we're still using it today, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, and then the last one in your piece is Italian couching.
Oh, right. Yes. So I don't have a picture of this. So imagine, do you know what a CC embroidery is?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, they've left something hollow as like there's no stitching, and that's the part that your eye is drawn to.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine, like, let's say I wanted to do the letter G for Gary. I would do I would draw a G on my fabric, and then I would stitch all around the G, but not on the G.
Mm-hmm.
So then the G becomes a bit raised up. It's totally only gold. You can't see anything. And because I haven't couched on it, it's not held to the fabric. So it has a very small bit of volume.
Oh.
It has no color, and your eye is drawn to just that gold.
Ah, okay. Okay.
It's like reverse. You're doing the reverse of everything else.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Before you used your colored threads to show your motif, and then this one you're using it to accentuate the negative space.
Right. Fascinating stuff. Fascinating. Now I have, and we need to wrap up here, but one question that I think applies to everything. When we're trying to get the couching thread to lie side by each, is there technique with your holding thread to force that to stay side by each? Or because that's got to be tricky so you don't get little gaps in between.
Right. So, I mean, with Ornue, you actually do want a very small gap, but you want it to be an equally small gap all along the metal thread. But typically, you know, if you've got your thread here and you've got your next one beside, your needle, when it comes up, it's coming out on an angle this way, and then it's going to go back down on an angle that way.
Okay. So it's that angle. It's that angle.
Angling helps to bring it snug, but you have to be careful that it's not too snug, because your cotton threads, where it's very densely couched, is going to push apart your threads a little bit. And then where it's less densely couched, you might have the inclination to stitch them close together, but then you can easily get a wobble in your row. So you have to be cognizant of the spacing all along your line.
Mm-hmm. See, I love that technique stuff, that fine little technique stuff that in the bigger picture makes such a huge difference. Mm. So that learning how to do that, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that you can do with couching, and I find it's, you know, some of the examples that I show of what people have done are quite fascinating. The I don't know if you want to show the one on page 26, Gary, if you have time.
Sure.
We can quickly show there. That's a Canadian artist, Marie Renee Otis. She took her damask fabric and she followed the pattern of the fabric to give you color on top of we'll call it a spirit woman. So I thought that is just a fascinating use of fabric and couching techniques.
Oh, that's what that's. Oh, see, I saw this in the paper and I did not understand why you were even showing this. And now that you point it out, holy smokes.
Isn't that creative?
That's really good.
Yeah. And, you know, I've seen others use a 3D dragon, a Welsh dragon, and a 3-dimensional samurai, all done in couching. Fascinating. There's lots of things that can be done, and I see a lot of embroiderers on social media who are using couching in very clever ways. So it'll be interesting to see if somebody writes this paper in 100 years from now again,
right.
You know, what they have to say about us.
Right. Yes, exactly. All right. And we need to wrap up. That's too bad. Okay. That's too bad because I got like 1,000 more questions. So we got to do another show. So tell me about supplies, because that's always the question. You get me interested. I want supplies now. And not everybody is like 2 places in the world that make these materials. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, the main place that I buy mine from is from Benton and Johnson in the UK. Mm-hmm. They're one of the 2 remaining small factories in the UK. But there's lots of people that supply the materials from Benton and Johnson through their shop. Because not everybody wants to buy in bulk, which is what you need to buy when you buy from Benton and Johnson. Mm-hmm. So, you know, in Canada, you can get goldwork supplies from Tanya Berlin. I think Needle in a Haystack has some or had some. You know, Allison Cole and Golden Hind. There's many shops. You just have to, you know, do a quick search for goldwork supplies. Sarah Humphrey has them. So I think most of them are getting their supplies from Benton and Johnson. Mm-hmm. and then cutting into more affordable, smaller quantities for consumers.
Yeah, I'm sure that's critical because that hank or two that you showed there, that'd be a bit much for just somebody doing one project. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just going to try it one time, you don't want to be buying in bulk, right?
Right.
For me, I kit up hundreds of kits, and so I need to buy in bulk.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
All right, Natalie. Boy, thank you. That was
It
fun.
was my pleasure. I'm very happy to share this information and have somebody who's interested.
Yep. All right, and we will put wherever I can links to Natalie's pages so you can see her kits. And we doing online courses these days?
Me, no.
No.
No, I have a couple through the EAC, and a couple of my notes are available as PDF. But what I do is when a student buys a kit from me, I have through Facebook a free support group. It's a closed group for people working through the design, and so we have comments there and pictures. So a little bit of online learning.
Yeah. All right. So when I start the Van Gogh thing, I won't be hanging out there in the open. I'll have help.
No.
Okay.
No, we expect pictures and feedback.
Okay. Well, I'm going to need help. I can guarantee you. All right, Natalie. Thank you so much, and thanks to everybody for watching.